board will please come to order, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We will begin our meeting on item 2, which is roll call, and for that I will ask our able secretary to get us started.
They were present to have it here. Dawson.
Here.
Jariga.
Here.
Peters.
Here.
Studemeyer.
And Studemeyer is expected delayed, but she expects to be here. The next is approval of the agenda.
So moved.
It's been moved by Jariga
I'll second.
and seconded by Dawson that we approve the agenda. Are there any comments? And here comes Emma. Are there any comments or any comments or additions to the agenda? Hearing none, we'll go for this. Been moved and seconded. So all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed by saying no. Then the agenda is approved and we will move along through it. The next item, of course, is our minutes, which were shared with board members and are available for the public. And I will entertain a motion on the minutes.
I'll make that motion to approve.
All right.
I'll
It's
second that.
moved by Dawson and approved by, supported by Jariga. And the minutes, and we do, as always, give everybody a chance. I'm sure you all have looked at them, but are there any things in there that need adjusting before we approve them? We always allow for corrections or, everybody good?
Yeah.
Hearing, okay, on that note, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed by saying no. A unanimous vote. And we'll note that the motion was made by the eagle-eyed spelling check lady. So these minutes seem to pass the muster. Now on to public comments. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak to us tonight?
I would, Barbara Miller, and I'd like to thank Mary Jo for the nice flyer on the marriage of Figaro, and the event is the sale. I ordered 25 tickets, and we have sold 18.
Wonderful. Wonderful. That
And
is
we still have
great.
time to, finish up to 25.
It'll be a great activity.
So how much are the tickets?
Here. Oh,
Barbara? Excuse me, how much are the tickets?
The tickets are $35. It's for the dress rehearsal. The tickets are really $25, but Dr. Pease is charging us $225 to come and speak. So the extra $10 will go toward the cost of Dr. Pease, who should not be missed. He is absolutely a fabulous speaker.
Good.
He does all of the opera introductions for the Michigan Opera. In his lectures, there are hundreds of people that come an hour early just to hear him talk about the opera. He's very witty, he's very well informed, and he plays other renditions, he references other performances and the greats who have sung this role and that role and so on. He's so informative, it's just thrilling. He's wonderful to hear. He's worth the price of the ticket.
Oh,
It's
great.
terrific.
It's Monday.
Monday, October 23rd.
Yeah, a couple of Mondays from now. Well, good. Thank you, and thank you for this collaboration between the library and BACA and on cultural events. It's fully appropriate and really good for this community, so thank you for speaking to us on that. We do have, do you need to do something in here, Amy?
Oh, I'm just bringing, oh, is that my?
Yeah,
Right,
it goes.
and Mary Jo just gave
Thank
me
you
copies
so
of the
much.
flyer.
Oh,
Thank you.
well, that's right on time. You were just speaking to that, Barbara, so there you go.
Yes.
Now we will move, if there's no other public comments, we'll move to item 6. And it is an item that we're really glad to move forward and resolve, take this big step we've been talking about since we talked about our new building. So it's a resolution which you have before you. The board members do, and I believe there were some for others to look at. A resolution to approve purchase and acquisition of 360 Charles Street property. That's the H&B property. We have resolution language in front of us, and we can entertain a motion on it. We can also have some discussion on it, some clarification to make sure everybody's straight. I think all board members are, but
Make a motion to accept the resolution as presented.
Second?
been moved by trustee Dawson and seconded by trustee Doriga that we approve the resolution. We have consulted with our lawyer. This is John Day's work, and Mary Jo and I met with John recently in the last couple of weeks. And this is an area we all have been working toward. I thank Joy for her great efforts in this piece. She's been in touch with the owner, and as have others, but especially Joy's been keeping on top of this. And this can be our first step, probably the first step that the public will see in terms of really moving forward on the new library site. And we'll talk a little bit later on the demolition of that and other things, but probably it's important to finalize this motion. Are there any questions or comments?
Yes, Tanya, I see here, the treasurer signs the check to Mrs. Domas for this property. Is there a number of signatures more than Tanya's on the check?
There's always two.
Two signatures. Okay.
And usually it's Mary Jo and either Tanya or I, but for this one, we'll have Tanya sign it for sure. And she does a lot of she checks over our checks and signs a lot of them. It's a good question. Anybody else? Then, this is a great step forward. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed by saying no. That is unanimous.
Do we have to do a roll call?
We might have to do a roll call. Then, I don't want you to have to just have nothing to do, Michelle, so would you call the roll?
Caver, yes. Chahavitz? Yes. Dawson? Yes. Hughes Groves? Yes. Doriga?
Yes.
Peters?
Here, yes, here and yes. So the motion carries with one absence and no dissenting votes. And since the absence will be the person signing the check, I think that'll take care of that. It's a unanimous issue.
Question, after we purchase this building next door, MJ's idea of having the fire department go through it and practice on the building?
It wasn't my idea.
No, you brought it up. You brought
It
it up.
was, right, it was asked.
Can we do that with the idea of taking photos of that, putting it in the paper, letting people know that we're moving on this? We purchased a building and the fire department is practicing and we're gonna knock it down. Can we do that?
Do we know that the fire department's practicing?
We don't know yet. We,
I was asked by one of the firefighters, it wasn't the chief,
Okay.
okay? I can contact the chief if you want me to.
And I believe that, I don't know, Mary Jo and I met with the city and met with Rick Rutherford as something, late last week, as something moved forward on getting a date. Because I think they were gonna, we brought up the fire chief's question.
Not that I'm aware
Really?
of. Although I was out Friday and Monday, so I.
Are you aware of any follow-up on that, Mary Jo? We talked, what day was that, Thursday that we went over and saw Diana? And then Diana brought Rick Rutherford in there, if you show, we will cover that both day and in the building committee, but the fire chief has had some concerns anyway about that they presented to us on the night of the site plan approval. So anyway, but maybe if you just follow up on, as you just said, on this specifically, if you can follow up with the fire chief.
Okay.
We have to take care of this paperwork and get the title and all that with John Day. That's gonna take us a little bit of time, and so to figure out on this question, we have a little bit.
And they don't want to burn it down, they just want to practice extricating people.
You set on fire, that gives them practice.
Well, the fire department did do a practice burn on the house across the street from us
Really?
a number of years ago before Davenport
Oh.
built that.
Plaza?
That
Mhm.
strip, and they had hoses going and sprays going, and we had singed bushes, and we were across the street from them. We had some singed bushes, and there was some melted siding on the neighbor's house. But it was quite a party on our front lawn.
I bet. Well, kind of related to that, Matt had sent out an email, was it yesterday, but related to the demolition of the HV property, and it might dovetail into this, is whether there is any hazardous materials that need to be addressed
Right.
before that would occur. So we want to make sure that any interest that the fire department has doesn't compromise our schedule and being able to kind of
Definitely.
move things forward.
So I think we can move parallel along. We'll move along on the legal steps to actually finalize the acquisition of the property. And our purpose of acquiring the property is for demolition. And so this conversation will move forward as we're finalizing the legal pieces.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I do have a correction to the resolution. My last name is Caver and not Carver.
Oh,
And I
That-
missed that. That's too fast, sorry.
that is appropriate to fix before we, yeah, somebody did do that. They do that to you all the time.
They do it all the time.
All the time.
You didn't catch it because people are so used to just automatically seeing that R there.
I got this from John Day, and they had your first name spelled wrong, so I caught that. Totally missed the last part.
We can't do everything. My maiden name is Claytor, and everybody spells it Clayton.
Clayton.
And I can't.
I thought that the R was right in your name.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
Only ours
I'm moving forward here.
Excuse
That's
me,
true.
Madam Chair, is there any reason why the resolution and the information about the house was not included in the public packet?
We didn't get the
Because we
resolution
had to.
until late yesterday.
Our
We've got it
attorney
on the
was
table.
working on it,
Oh,
and we did put it out there for the public to pick up when they came in. So it's there, our attorney, we have a lot of stuff in this packet, and we worked very hard to get it all together, but some of it came right in time for the meeting. But this has been an issue this board has been talking about for over a year. So we have a motion with a second on the table, and, and we already
roll
voted.
call's been
We
done.
did do
Yeah,
the roll
yes.
call.
So
We're done.
We're done.
We're done.
We're done on that, we're just talking on other stuff. Yeah, I was thinking we were appropriately talking on the motion, but we're
You
not.
approved the amended resolution.
Yes, we have to.
We have to amend it to spell people's names correct.
Do we need to vote on that? Okay.
That's will take. So we're already to committee reports. And as is our habit, our biggest committee report is going to be our building committee. But we do have important work that's come from the policy committee, which kind of dovetails into the marketing committee. So we have a lot of things to talk about in these few items. But I will open with item 7A, which is the building committee. And I will ask trustee Joy Chehevitz to kind of help us. We have some voting issues on this report, and then some discussion issues.
Well, I guess we mentioned at the last meeting, we've been working on getting the budget, construction budget in line so that we can go forward can do design, what is it, D&D, design and development?
Design development.
And development.
DD.
part. DD. Budget for the next step. It's taking, did you count up the hours? Many hours just to get this.
77.
Well, that's total.
That's the
That's-
meat.
You didn't subtotal the budget crunch downs numbers. So what you have in your board packet is our cost estimate for schematic plan before the next step. So there'll be 3 different points when we're approving the budget, and this is the first point. And it is slightly below, I believe, or on target for the budget that passed the referendum.
It does.
I'm not gonna go into detail because I know Matt has it memorized. Do you wanna talk about it at all, Matt? These are with
Not
O'Neill's
necessary for me to
estimates.
talk about it unless somebody has a specific question.
So we have Matt here to answer questions. This is an important, the people on the building committee are well aware, but I think we all are well aware that there are stages in time. And budgets, of course, are planned. So this represents a major step in the planning because we had a basic idea when we went to the ballot, but this is really detailed. And then as actual construction and bidding and all that, and permitting and all that takes place, there will be further refinements. So,
The quick summary that really makes the most sense for those that are on the building committee is, is referencing the square footage at the top of the page, referencing the date of the estimate, and then on page 2, the total estimated cost. Those are really the snapshot in time that say, we've established a schematic design budget on, October 5th for a square footage building of 31,401 at a current budget of 10,035,000. Those are really the summary of all this detail moving forward, is that on such and such a date, we've established a budget for a building of this size.
And we've been working on that. The first one we got was 8/11, so that's how
Almost
long
2
it's
months.
taken us to get that down. The floor plan has had some adjustments, which Dan will go into. But I would like to have a, what is it called? I'm drawing a blank, not a resolution.
yeah,
A motion, thank you, to approve the budget, as you see.
I'll make a motion to approve the budget as presented.
Thank you.
so this, and as I said, this item requires the vote, and we have a duly made motion and second. I believe this can be, voice vote.
I think it should be a roll call.
All right, the maker of the motion is asking for a roll call, and that just gives the secretary another chance. So we will have a roll call vote on this motion.
Hughes Road. Yes. Boston.
Yes.
Devitt. Yes. Saber, yes. Jerica.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Peters.
Yes.
Skip right over you, didn't
That's all right. And you got your Viva too.
I did it.
So this motion carries with no dissenting votes. And again, it's not the last time we will see it, but the public, we are coming in and what the public voted us, and we had to work really hard, the building committee as a whole, and then some background meetings that have taken place with me, with our director, with our building committee chair, and with others, to make sure that we are able to provide library services, but also live within the amount allocated by the public a year ago. Just 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 under a year ago. So that's very good, and that item has been approved. And we have some discussion on some of the changes, right?
Well, I think they can be looked at, some of them can be looked at as we go through the plan, the updated plans.
Yeah, we do. These were supposed to be in your board packet. But unfortunately, I had some miscommunication with my office, and they didn't get sent to you on Thursday like they were supposed to, so I apologize for that. This sort of mini packet of, basically it's the floor plans and the exterior elevations. The last page is the updated schedule. But this is, this kind of goes hand in hand with the budget that Matt presented. So this is, as Matt said, the budget is a square footage and a date and time, and so this plan kind of is the match to that, more or less, with all the work that the building committee has been doing the last 2 months to try to zero in on the design as well as the budget. These plans and elevations, this actually represents the updated or revised plans and elevations that were shared with the planning commission at the meeting where they approved the project for site plan approval. So, we will continue to make revisions and changes as we go forward, but they're going to be more minor and really, as Joy said, the next stage with your approval tonight is for us to move into the design development phase, and this is where the engineers get much more involved in working things out. We're working with the structural engineer on the size of the beams, the size of the columns, and we're going to be tweaking the plan and the details as we develop all of that, so it all comes together nicely. So that's really what design development means. We start to lock down the plan and start addressing things much more specific and much more engineering level than what we have done to date in terms of schematic design. We've done a little of that already, just because we kind of had to work out or think through some things, because it was critical for us to being able to find some cost savings. So we've been kind of already doing a little of that design development. But just briefly, the big changes that we made from the very first schematic design package that I think was dated July 26th or thereabouts. We've cut about 2,600 square feet out of the building, so we kind of locked off some space that was bumping out towards Roy Street. We've gone through some plan changes and iterations as a response to that, and we're kind of continuing to do some of those things. With the elevations, so actually, if you jump to the second floor, one of the things we did is we actually reduced the outdoor terrace on the second floor in the southwest corner from a full column bay to a half column bay. And we made some of those changes. We had to make the teen area a little bit larger from the very earliest plan. And then moving on to the elevations, we've made... That's right.
Now the terrace,
Oh, yeah. The terrace was bigger.
I thought we went back to
We
a
talked
full.
about the terrace going
That's why those are here.
bigger, but
Okay.
they're not there.
This is the plan that
Okay.
marries
Okay.
with
I got
what
Yeah.
where the budget is at. So
Okay,
it is a moving target.
Okay.
It will continue to evolve, but as a snapshot of time, I wanted you to have sort of the plan and elevations that go hand in hand with the budget. So we made some changes in the elevations to the stair tower, which is going to save us some costs in terms of the site design. And we've changed some of the materials in terms of we had a stone base previously. We removed that, so that was reflective on on the plan and elevations that we shared with the planning commission. So those were some of the changes that we had discussed. As we go forward, because and Mary Jo is commenting, or not Mary Jo, MJ is commenting about the terrace. We know going forward, one of the things we're going to toy with is moving. When we did that half terrace, it creates some other challenges for us structurally. So we've started to develop a plan that actually brings us back to a full terrace. And the building committee has seen this plan and had some positive comments about it in terms of a full bay terrace may actually be more functional in terms of possibly doing some programming out there than the half bay. We actually reduced the square footage of the building by another roughly 450 square feet. There's going to be, we haven't got to the cost impact of that, but just early discussions was we think it's going to be at least a wash in terms of trading floor space with terrace space, where there's likely some inherent savings that we'll realize as we continue to go forward. So that's one option. What it does is it shifts some of the programming around on the second floor. And so that is, this is going to be one of those areas that we start looking at next as we move into the design development phase. And sort of this actually reconfigures the staff space, which I think actually works much nicer in terms of bringing adult staff and IT staff together in a room where they get more natural light and view, and we've shrunk down the mechanical room. There's just a number of changes that are just inherent in, as we move forward. The alternative, if we don't change the size of the outdoor terrace, we have that half bay terrace up above, and in your packet you'll see the elevations. We had 4 large arched window openings fronting on Charles and Roy Street, and we recognize that if we were to keep the half bay terrace, we're going to have to deal with some structure through there, and so sort of our alternative solution to that is possibly looking at borrowing the sort of half bay arches that we have in the meeting room that face the parking lot and use them here to turn the corner, and we know that's going to simplify the structure, simplifying structure, simplifying the building in general, helps reduce costs. So we know that that's going to be another cost-saving strategy. So what I'm showing here too is either or. It's not both. So it's a matter of us working through with the building committee kind of preferences and what seems to make the most sense. And we think there's good sound justifications both functionally as well as from a cost standpoint. Any questions on that?
Yeah, the last few months, a lot is going on that conference room.
On the first floor? Second floor?
Yeah. Second floor, like, that bump out, we're keeping that?
At this point, I think we're keeping it, yes. We've just...
The board room.
The board conference room. Yeah.
We had talked
about, we have a whole shopping list of potential cost reduction items. I think that was still in the potential category.
Okay.
Is that your recollection?
Yep.
Some of the things that we have tried really hard to keep is the height and the statement that the open circular stairway makes, and the little tower that's on this elevation.
The stair to the roof access.
To
And
try to keep it from just being a square, plain building, those
box.
a box, yes. Those are 2 of the things. We have, though, gone down in the number of arched windows. I think either way, right?
No.
We had 4.
We always had 4. We still have 4 in, I guess, this plan.
Yeah.
Or we may look at
The
creating,
smaller arches.
taking. In this version, we'd have 2 large arches and then the small ones, plus the ones we have in the meeting room. So, as Joy mentioned, the building committee has wrestled with many different options for how we might bring the project back on budget and cost savings. And we'll continue to explore basically all of those that make sense. But the committee had, after multiple meetings and countless hours, right, John? They had kind of came to a consensus that they really wanted to not lose the personality and the character of the design. So while we had lots of different things that were, you could say, kind of on the chopping block, the decision was to try to preserve the circular stair that we had, the circular lobby coming up to the second floor as a significant entry element and a sort of a key design aspect of the building. We wanted to save the terrace as a space, as a place you can go out to, whether it's full size or half size, that was important. And we wanted to save the sort of tower element that the stair, and in particular the functional aspect of having stair access to the roof, which makes it much more convenient and easy for maintenance people to take care of and maintain the mechanical equipment that's up on the roof. So those were some key elements. And also we talked about materials too, looking at alternate materials. So those were the kind of the major elements in addition to not wanting to compromise functionality. And so while we've reduced the size of the building from the very first sort of schematic design package, we've maintained the program and even sort of enhanced it where we can by trying to find space and sort of find some inefficiency that was in the original plan. So that's been, I think, a great process in terms of getting us down to a really workable plan. And then we have a number of items that are still being pursued, a couple that are related to the site or the site plan. Is we already reduced the height of the mechanical equipment screen, sort of in our sort of original assumption. We had that at 12 feet high. We've been getting information from the engineers and how big the equipment was going to be. We decided we could reduce that to 8 feet. And then our next step is we'd like to have a conversation with the city about possibly limiting it altogether, because we've done some sort of perspective views, and you have to get quite a ways away from the building to really start seeing mechanical equipment that's going to sit up on the roof. So
And it's about $70,000. Yeah, 70,000.
it's at least 70,000 more that we could save. So as the project moves forward, there's the thought process is there's a lot of things we could do with the building and in the building for $70,000 versus an equipment screen up on the roof that is really just hiding, metal boxes. And so that's a significant element. That's going to be a conversation with the city. So we've reached out to them about scheduling a meeting to discuss that. And then the other large item is dealing with the stormwater detention. And so we have the plan that was sent to the city has underground storage delineated on it, and it's going to be, we know it's going to be challenging and it's costly, but we know it's going to be physically challenging to be able to get that put in so close to the building. So we have very limited site space, trying to keep this library open while we're building the building over there, and then using up basically what's now the library's current parking lot to dig this big hole that we can deal with stormwater. So we think there's merit in having a conversation with the city about reducing or eliminating that storage component, and we think there's at least another $70,000 there. So again, that's spending, if we end up putting it in, we're spending money on something that's underground that nobody gets to really enjoy or benefit from. So there's a number of things like that that we'll just continue to work through, and that's kind of the nature of the process as we go on to this next phase. Any questions?
Hearing none. Thank you, Dan. And the building committee meets again next week, correct?
Monday.
Tuesday, Monday.
It's Thursday.
Monday is what I have on my calendar. Monday.
Monday at 1:30?
The 16th.
So,
I'm
this,
sure you're right.
this will be continued, but
Yes,
that,
Monday, in the middle of the day,
yeah.
1:30.
So building committee meets Monday at 1:30.
1:30 to 2:30.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Stan's
1:30.
gonna be there. Who knows this? So.
Well, I will leave at 3:30, one way or the other.
I'll write that down for you, man.
So I think what would be, we can talk about the schedule now or maybe later, or next.
You remember, we were provided a schedule earlier on, and of course, it's had to be adjusted
Yeah,
because
so,
things change.
yeah, so this is a, again, a continuing evolution, but what we've done is we've shifted the schedule out because we were originally we're gonna have this, approval of the schematic design back in, I wanna say in August, 1st of August, which didn't take place, and now we're into October. So essentially, we've kind of lost 2 months, and so we've pushed the schedule out 2 months to reflect that. We've also added, and this is a little bit still in flux, but we've added here the possibility that we might be looking at doing work with the H&B property in terms of its building demolition, and Matt has been doing some legwork on a possible timeline, and we have to look into the hazardous materials potential and how that might impact it. But potentially we could be demolishing that building in December, which is what is the tentative timeline for that. Likewise, we originally had the notions of possibly doing the site prep and utilities relocation yet in 2017. Well, with this sort of budget work that we've done through the summer, that is no longer likely. It doesn't make sense to do that site work in 2017, so that's going to get pushed into 2018. Matt and I had a conversation, but it's not final yet in terms of what makes the most sense. Originally, we had planned about 2 months, 8 weeks of time for that sort of early site prep. We had originally planned for about 14 months of construction, and Matt and his team will certainly look at that much more closely and what's makes sense. But we've reflected in this revised schedule that we might still consider kind of releasing the site prep, the utility, as kind of an early package that would be sort of the start of construction. So what I've done is we've moved that early. And that might suggest, and it's a question: do we need 8 weeks, or is it 4 weeks? So are we really going to go from a 14-month construction period to 16 or 15? So we need to still work that out with Matt and his team. But the idea is summertime is a great time to be doing construction, particularly outside construction. So to be able to get the utility work going ahead of the building may make some sense.
So is that the site prep in April?
Yeah, well, so that would be like the bidding, sort of the bidding phase of that, in terms of when we might be seeing an early package that's just dealing with, say, utilities and the site prep. Most of that engineering work is going to be done already. What I'm suggesting we avoid is doing kind of a true separate bid package that would start the building construction before we have the complete cost known. I think that's not
wise.
not prudent. So we sort of tried to do that at the Commerce Library, and it basically was a waste of effort. We bid out the site work, foundations, and structural steel, but those packages were $2 million or thereabouts, and we didn't know what the final cost of the project was going to be, so nobody had the nobody had the confidence to award those contracts until we had bid out the rest of the project. So there was really no advantage to taking that approach. Here, the site work is going to kind of be the site work. You know, we don't have a lot of ability to rethink the sanitary sewer relocation. So I think as long as if that bid's out early and we're sort of on budget based on where Matt and his team thinks it's going to be, then that's probably a logical thing to do.
And we're still together with DTE. I mean, they said something about
It's been a couple weeks since I had any exchange with them. Might have been even a month. Might have been before the last board meeting.
They still haven't, yes.
Nothing, they still haven't yet, which they said was not unusual. But I'll have to prompt them, I guess. They had told us it was going to be a 6 to 8 month time frame for them to
So
do
they might be
their
sitting
work.
on that check for 6 to 8, I mean, don't we have a time frame that they're, it's been about
Probably.
100
It's 180 days, so.
No, since we signed the check and sent it off, it's been a couple months.
180 days,
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is, oh,
so
6 months,
so, yeah.
6 months, so. Yeah, we were worried about 2 or 3 days getting that check off. We were worried that we were delayed by 2 days, but they're gonna wait to cash it, so anyway, that.
It's last way exchanging emails with them, they were working on the engineering aspect, and they said, you know, it's not, they don't typically, I think, cash the check until they're kind of ready to proceed.
So they have things straight. Okay. Our bookkeepers have to just be used to that.
We could have kept the money in the investments.
Yeah, yeah, that's the thing, it could be still,
Had we known they were going to do that.
had we known, we were in a hurry to get that moving, because we knew they had to have it before they'd start, so.
So in terms of the schedule, the bottom line, what it does is it pushes out when we will complete the building and move in terms of being able to vacate this building. But essentially, when the entire project is complete in terms of the new parking lot, that hasn't really changed, I think, significantly, because that was already being pushed out because of winter weather. So we couldn't start parking lot work until March, April anyway. So the end date hasn't really dragged out any further, but the timing of when we will move from this building into the new building has shifted. And Matt will need to do with these things, Matt and his team will need to look at, you know, any of the ramifications of really how the timing and sequence of the work falls as far as the seasons of the year. So that's all to be developed as we go forward.
Thank you. Matt, do you have any comments on that time frame?
No, it's exactly what Dan and I spoke about. And the biggest thing was to continue the discussion amongst all of us for taking advantage of some of the spring or summer,
Yeah, ideal times.
the ideal times. Just trying to take advantage of those good building months, because that may help us to have better, warmer weather for putting in, say, foundations in September versus maybe foundations in November. And then just understanding the impact of that, what it means to the budget, which portions would move forward while which portions are still unknown. So it'll be a good discussion to have, and we have some time to have it.
Okay.
And then, we're done talking about the main building. We did have a conversation with Esther about the satellite ranch.
Joanne, can I interject?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry. I think it would be prudent or helpful, while the board just passed a motion to approve the budget, it's probably prudent to sort of officially approve schematic design that allows us to sort of formally move into the design development phase, since that's kind of a contractual milestone for us. If that's something you're willing to do.
Well, I don't.
Keep us moving forward.
I'll make a motion to approve schematic design thus far, as we're done with that part, I guess.
I'll second that.
There's been a motion by Evans and supported by Dawson to approve the schematic design updates as presented. And we've had a good amount of discussion. Is there any more, or anything else anybody wants to ask or add, or seeing none? All those in favor, well, do we need to? Or can we just do by voice vote? I think voice vote, nobody's yelling about it, a roll call. So all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed by saying no. The ayes, it is unanimous on the members present that we approve the updates on the schematic design as presented tonight, and understanding the various things that are going to develop as we move along. So are there other items? Yes, there are other items. Joy was beginning to talk about Sumter, and she's talking about a result of a meeting that the director, Mary Jo, and I, and the building committee chair had with our liaison in Sumter, which is Sumter Clerk Esther Hurst.
And her deputy clerk, Dawn was there also.
Yeah, Dawn. Dawn, whatever, one, yeah.
And so we gave a very, very draft possible lease agreement. And she's taking it to the board and they'll talk about it, and the Bravion, the attorney. And we'll get back together. You can go and Dan's group can do field measurements anytime. I don't know if you've had time.
Did it this morning.
You did?
Okay.
Great.
All right. Any news from that?
Well, some, yeah, yeah, some things to work through, talk about. So, just, it's gonna be just trying to work through the preferred scope of the project. So, the roof does have a leak, the exterior door sticks. So there's just gonna be some things that, we know we need to deal with. So.
Now, O'Neill is not doing this work on the satellite, are they?
They're currently not under contract to do that now.
Who's doing this?
Nope.
Yeah,
That's a
been
decision
decided.
for us to make.
We have not got that far yet. We're getting the design together first, and then we have to.
There's
Well,
about-
the board
In
did
other words,
decide.
do we put bids out, the library board?
Essentially,
We would,
yes.
yes.
The entire job? Maybe one company or?
Well, Matt and his team would probably be happy to do the project as a construction management, but it's a small,
Yeah.
This
very
could go
small
under
project
general
where-
contract.
It's not that big.
where it's,
Yeah, it's not.
Or you could go in and do it.
Yes,
this is a project, and the nature of the work is certainly well suited to a general construction contract, which would be bid out, competitively bid to qualified general contractors, and they would hold the contract. Not unlike how Matt and his office is going to kind of hold the contract with all the subcontractors for the downtown library, but it's just a different form of contracting and how it works. But it's similar but different.
Same but different.
I mean, in terms of the execution, the building's going to get built, or it's going to get renovated in a similar way with the same kind of oversight.
There's approximately $200K in escrow there, and we have currently $250,000 in our budget to go towards this project. And the goal is to open in fall, early fall of 2018, by the time school starts.
I did chat with Ken, who I guess is maybe the head person there. He was not present today, but one of his colleagues, John, was there, so he left us in the building and was helpful in answering all the questions. They're, of course, they're going somewhere else, and so they're curious about when they have to be out, and I kind of said, well, you know, we haven't defined that yet as far as the library is concerned, but, you know, we're looking at a you know, summer or fall opening, so I said that'll be something that the library will be communicating with the township on when's the right time, you know, schedule-wise, and you know, the library may need to take that over to start, you know, renovation.
Just wanted to let everyone know we're moving forward on that one too.
Yeah.
The meeting with Clerk Hurst was a very productive one. She was very supportive and agreeable. I think all three of us felt very pleased. In fact, she was, in some ways, exceeded our expectations in terms of things that she thought could be done, but she was, you know, she's one person out there, so she was not, we couldn't make any definitive things until she's able to talk to other people out there. But the Sumter Board has designated her as the liaison, the lead person on this issue. And we have every reason to think that we are moving ahead in a way that's acceptable and desired by the Sumter community and the leadership in Sumter. The draft lease that Joy referenced is one that we did speak earlier about. It was drafted by I know it goes without saying, but I am going to say it was drafted by our attorney, John Day, after our interaction with him, which again was Mary Jo and I and Joy. Then he drafted up based on that. He had moved it to some steps. So now it's a chance for Sumter to look at it, but certainly more this board will look at it. The building committee as a whole will look at it, and it's, as I said, as Joy said, just in draft form right now. It's moving forward the appropriate steps. But we were pleased that there was no apparent
No
barriers
issues.
or problems or issues, and that has gone along. So we've been busy since the last meeting, not just on the many, many hours of the,
You didn't get to count those then.
yeah,
That's one of my concerns is that in the process, the main library and the satellite library go together in this process. Why were we not involved in this process with
this,
Sumter,
that
in this
you,
meeting?
you are, it wasn't the whole building, I don't know, the whole building committee is not charged to do everything that has to be done. We had to get a lot of meetings done.
Yeah.
You wanted more hours?
Yeah.
I mean, we have been,
Like you get paid for this, right?
we were concerned, it's really your issue about so many hours and stuff, we didn't really want to push too much.
No,
harder.
stop.
Well,
I just said,
what do we-
I'm keeping a diary, and people say, well, what's going on? And 77
However,
attorneys.
If there
It's
was,
not
It wasn't intentional, it was
there was
just
no
in the-
intention to exclude anyone.
Right, it was
And
just in the
if
interest of
there
getting
is
that
a very good openness, so if there are
Yeah.
other members of the building committee or other members of the board, there are other Sumter residents on this board who want to get a closer feel for what's going on, we will accommodate that. And at one point, when you said something, we had thought maybe you could go down there when Dan did, but all of us are trying to get this done so that we can keep moving, and we meet and then we try to move to keep things going, so nobody's trying to exclude anybody. So I would appreciate after this meeting, if there's anybody on this board, it doesn't have to be, in my view, it's not like the building committee are the only people that have, so we don't call everything just for the building committee, this is a board. So anybody on the board who wants more or needs more contact with Sumter, let me know.
And John,
We'll
just
set
as
things up.
an FYI, all the previous meetings that we've had with John Morgan, I've always invited other people to go with me. So Lachelle's been once, MJ's been once. I've invited you. I will next time.
Thank you.
I'd like to be involved in the loop.
Okay.
We may, for another day, but we may, there may be an advantage for the building committee to meet down there.
I think there is, yeah.
It could even be this next meeting that worked out with their staffing. There's no real place to sit other than their desks to have a meeting, but like we typically do. But there could be advantages for us being present there as we're talking about what is it we're going to do with the space. That might be helpful, particularly if it's been a long time since people have seen the building.
Right.
And they do seem to be very accommodating to us. It's not like, I have no sense that we wouldn't be able to. And it is good for us to do it while the weather is still good, you know, while we get down there before, so perhaps. And we can let everybody know, so if there's people that aren't on the building committee that want to come.
If you have a quorum, you really need to have.
We could
Yeah.
announce it if we, yeah, I mean, it would be a public, as our building committees are now, we announce those as
They're
public
public
meetings.
Well, they're posted, that's.
We post them as public meetings.
We spent about 3 hours, you haven't met Kevin Kerwin from our office, but he joined me and we spent about 3 hours measuring the building this morning. And he has to spend some time making some changes to the drawings. But in general, I think no major surprises in terms of some of our layouts. The big thing, we talked about the mechanical sort of noise issue there. And I didn't realize it before, but the actual, there is ductwork, but it's under slab. So that big grill you see is actually return air. And so that's going to have a bearing on how we address the acoustical concerns that she had. And where that ductwork is underneath the slab may influence what we can do as far as reconfiguring toilets. So I was asking Matt about companies that maybe do ground penetrating radar to see if there's any value that we might want to figure out what's underneath the slab that we can't see. So I think about that.
Good. And we'd have to let Matt know in time that he might have a meeting that he wouldn't have to do at this point. You know, we don't have to drag him out there. So if then you're not suggesting this for the board,
I would rather you do it for this coming meeting.
This
just 'cause I've
coming
gotta go
meeting,
back
we've
to
got
work.
things that we've got planned that it's gonna be in Monday, right?
It's Monday and I'm leaving work, coming here and going back to work, so I would rather not make that farther.
Yeah, our topic with the South Satellite Media Center is really to figure out what it is we want to do. That's going to be the major agenda item.
So let's probably plan it for the next meeting.
Is parking the library responsibility too? What are the plans for parking out there?
Actually, Sumter responded to us that they will continue to handle parking.
Because it's also parking that they need, and so.
There's existing
At
parking
least
at the
Esther was-
building, but I didn't.
There's
have
not enough to accommodate an increase in the library. I mean, I go there fairly often, and it's full all the time. It's
You're
full
talking-
now. It's
Not in front of the Hexagon building. You're talking about the community
the
center.
community, yes.
It's not in the
It's not-
community center.
It's not even hardly busy ever in front of the
Okay, so
Hexagon.
the Hexagon, where is its parking?
It's right out in front of it.
So there's the community centers the farthest south, then the old post office, and then the Hexagon, and then
It's
the
kind of right
DPW.
straight across from the
The
Sumter Township
building.
Hall.
Yeah.
They call it an octagon, but it's really a hexagon.
They added they throw in two sides that aren't there.
They're camouflage.
It's interesting, it's good for people to, but it's, the concept we will have, at least at the beginning, limited hours and the capacity, and it's a small building and it's a media center, so it's not conceived to be a capacity like a small library would be. It's a small capacity. People that need to access Wi-Fi or need to get supports in
Which is what Sumter residents clearly.
That's what the people of Sumter asked for.
Yeah, I didn't count the number of parking spaces that are there. My gut instinct is it's gonna be adequate, and I think the parking that is across the street at the township municipal office certainly provides good, close overflow parking if there was, you know.
Yeah, but if we filled every single if we had one person in there
Or
for
computer.
every car that was there, we'd still have,
I think there's more parking there than there is out here.
yeah.
And
There is
I think there
parking,
may
right.
be.
And more parking there than there's room for people inside.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think for the capacity of that building, we have sufficient parking. Mary Jo, did you have anything to say on that item, because you're thinking it through on how you're doing and stuff?
Yeah, I think parking will be fine.
And Sumter, there were a lot of things that Sumter felt they were gonna continue to do in that area. But again, it was a preliminary meeting. Nothing permanent was done anywhere, it's just we have to keep moving, keeping things going, because while we're spending so much time concentrating on the downtown building, which is very complex, which is why we have a construction manager situation here, we have to just make sure that we don't just lose track of this. Sumter had a lot of, you will recall, Sumter had a lot of changes in there. They had losses on their board, they had to do some things, and so when both parties got ready to start looking, we just tried to move as quickly as we could.
One thing we learned this morning that I guess I wasn't aware of, if we had known it before, I just didn't register, but the building is on a septic system, so maybe they knew that when we got on Sumter, but I guess it didn't realize
Almost
that.
all on septics,
Yeah.
just a few, I mean, I'm not now, but I have no amount of main drag that required that we get hook on sewer, but
Yeah.
most of Sumter's septic.
So, I mean, given the age of the building, I think the building is probably from the early 70s-ish is what I was, but we don't really have any data on that. And at least for the last, few years that building has been occupied, there's been 2 or 3 or maybe at most 4 people using that facility. So there hasn't been a big demand in terms of demand on the septic tank or the drain field. So it's kind of one of those things I don't know how, I don't know if we can have it tested. I'm guessing you can't really, but when we open the library in there,
You can get them tested.
yeah, in terms of the drain field, I'm not sure about that. I mean, obviously the tank they can clean out, but,
Yeah,
but
Is the sewer line very far away from that building?
I don't
It's-
think there's a sewer line, I don't know if there's a.
well,
sewer
there's a
Sumter
septic tank,
Road.
and they actually had it marked, so I measured where the tank is, but just so we know. But when we have, if the building goes gangbusters and we have every seat filled, every hour of the day, which is what we're hoping for, we're gonna put a much greater demand on that, septic field. So it's kind of a,
Well, the water table is high in Sumter, so that, where that septic field is in relation to the building and its
Mhm.
level.
So it may be, I guess I'm pointing out, because it may be an issue we want to talk about in terms of your leaks and how you're dealing with that, and whether that's becomes a library responsibility, because it could be down the road, it could be a big deal if that field were to fail. So I don't know. This is something we ought to be aware of. It might happen down the road after we've spent our bond dollars, and then it could be something that you have to deal with from an operating standpoint.
Should we have that discussion?
This is a spoiler alert.
We will have,
Well, I'm
we
just
will
trying
have
to
to add those into the discussion.
be, wasn't something that was on our radar before, so.
We may need to, I believe you can get an inspection,
Yeah.
those folks do that. At least I remember getting one on mine before we bought it.
Yeah, I'm sure you
There
can.
has to be record someplace.
Yeah,
I think we need to handle this issue outside of this.
right,
meeting.
right.
So, we will continue it.
But thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah,
It was,
Thank you.
it was new information as of this morning, so.
thank you. And obviously, we'll take all the comments and engage all the people that are wanting to see it's important. It's important for us all to be on the, as John said, in the loop and on the same page.
Don't make any bad jokes in the paper.
About the septic system, yes.
What's that?
I think I kept it clean.
I so wanna say something, but I can't.
Yes, I hope you will all keep it clean. We are still on 7A. Is
I don't
there
have anything
anything
else.
further? So we did get into something that was appropriate because we kind of have a lot that we've been concentrating on the main building. Item 7B is the bylaws committee. Trustee Jariga?
I have no report.
There is no finance committee report. The marketing committee, trustee Hughes Grubbs.
Well, we had a meeting here. What was it?
That's a policy committee.
Policy.
We did,
Discuss some,
maybe when we talked to the policy, about the policy committee, we could talk about the cross, because the two members of those committees are
Here we are.
right here, together again, as they always are. So, there's a lot going on in terms of marketing, but it kind of is under the issue of the policy committee. So, yeah,
yeah, and one other thing, we discussed about getting a sign, coming attraction sign, so that people that pass through the area would, you know, kind of have an idea exactly where the site is, and, you know, it's just.
and
I can speak to that.
Director, and Mary Jo has some things to tell you.
We have requested a temporary sign permit from the city to post a sign, right in front of the parking lot across the street that says future home of the Belleville District Library. So we're waiting for permission to do that. They did pull out, there was a dead tree in that sidewalk that they pulled out for us, so we have a place we can put that sign, so.
There's right now a barrel out there, and we did discuss this when we went and talked with the city manager and Rick Rutherford, who did come over really quickly. You had talked to him, came over really quickly and got the, but there is a process about this sign, temporary sign thing. And we're working on the design of the sign.
So we've got the design, we're just waiting for to go ahead and
So this
we have it
Thursday,
made.
we've got a planning commission meetings, could be brought up then?
I don't know if it needs to be.
I don't
for
think
now.
temporary,
Yeah.
temporary
Oh,
sign
yeah,
goes to
okay.
the
You just
planning
need to
commission.
sign off on it, so.
It used to be,
And we're looking at, Dan is gonna come with his gang of architects and people from his office. We're gonna temporarily mark off the building footprint in time for Harvest Fest, so that if you come to Harvest Fest, you'll be able to see the footprint of the building.
And Harvest Fest is this Saturday.
Weather
So this
permitting,
is-
so I think
yeah.
that we'll do that. We'll probably we've got those pull-up signs right now that show all of the buildings, and we'll probably put those out there too, so that people can see.
Yeah,
can
by
see them.
Saturday, we won't have this permanent temporary sign. We won't have a real temporary sign, but we'll do the best we can for Harvest Fest.
People walking around can kind of get a general idea
That's where the building
where the building's
outline
gonna be.
falls.
There's a lot of people who still don't understand exactly where the building is. They haven't been coming to these meetings or our forums or all those things. And you have to come inside the library to see what we have. We have a lot of information. We invite people in all the time, but we want something that people just driving down the street can see. So, and the Harvest Fest is a good time for that. So thank you. That's a very good part of our marketing efforts, and we have talked about it kind of as a committee. So there. Thank you. Any other items, Alma?
not at this time.
Oh, maybe we'll pull you in a minute. Personnel Committee, trustee Caver.
So the personnel committee will be meeting very soon because time is coming up for our director's evaluation. So personnel committee will be meeting to review the evaluation form to see if there's any revisions that need to be made before it's handed out to the board as a whole to do the director evaluation. And we're hoping to have that evaluation completed by December 2017.
Something to be looking for, board members. Now, another good attraction of this is a policy committee. Our policy committee chair's been working really hard, and we have some fruit to show for it, so.
Okay,
Mary
so,
Jo.
I'm hoping that all of the board members looked at their email over the weekend, because I sent all of you an email saying, I found a couple of oopses in the draft policy. I sent all of you another copy that showed where things were going to be changed or fixed, okay? And in your packet, if you picked it up after noon this afternoon, I'm not sure how many of you did, you should have the current policy with everything fixed. And the current policy, the current draft policy, very first line says policy for permanent art acquisition, art display, and composition of BADL art selection committee. Does everybody have that one? That's it. If it doesn't have this line at the top, you have the old one. Do you have some new ones?
I believe they were sitting at our foot, no, I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Something was sitting at our.
That was
I
the
think that's
resolution.
a resolution.
Yeah, that
Oh.
was Do you have copies?
I have copies of.
It was on the back.
And the public
That
can,
was all right.
the public can have copies of this.
Is there another?
Okay.
Do you,
Barbara, it should be, if you got the packet over here, it should be the correct one, is that? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so just a little bit of background for those of you who may not be familiar with this process that I did. I researched, I think it was 6 different libraries in different parts of the Midwest, basically, getting an idea of what their policies were for permanent and temporary art displays. This policy in particular is just for permanent. We're going to be working on temporary exhibits of art in the future, but we wanted to get this nailed down, you know, before we went on to the temporary. So we've had a couple of meetings. The beginning of it has the mission statement for the library, and then Mary Jo added the second paragraph, which is, we believe art adds meaning, and I'm not going to read the whole thing because I know all of you can read, which takes in the mission statement and also leads into the policy itself. So just to give you an idea of what I found in some of these places were like 10 items. Those were their regulations, rules, you know, policy, whatever. There was another one that I think was 13 pages, close to 13 pages. So we've come somewhere in between. We think we've gotten all of the necessary ingredients to go forward with this policy. So I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. I know you guys have had access to it. So if you have questions, comments, whatever, go ahead and ask me. Unless you want me to go through the whole darn thing.
I think it is important what Mary Jane just said, that this is the focus of this policy is permanent acquisition, art acquisition. It does begin with a discussion about an art selection committee. And this board, the policy committee, and all of us have a view of that art selection. It tells us about the type of people involved. But this board has a view of activity for arts and amenities beyond this art selection of permanent holdings. And it is important to know that we have been simultaneously, as we've been talking to the BACA and the Friends and members of the community that we want to engage in this issue, we've talked about some of the other areas which particularly have to do with fund development. We can't acquire art if we don't have money to acquire it, and the acquisition of art is not what the bond went to the people for. So it's important to know that that aspect, which is so important, is, while not specifically addressed in this particular document gets us started with a committee on art selection, but it is looked at that out of the group and interest shown in that group, we will get some special targeted subcommittees. And the one that we know right now we need to get is the fund development aspect moving along right away. So I just wanted to make that clear, because as you look at the words in here, our view is for something broader. We need some things that are broader than this policy that starts us going. But this policy that starts us going is really excellent work. It reflects a lot of work from Mary Jane, but also input from the committee. I thank Alma for her work, Mary Jo for hers. I've looked at it. It's important that we start on this. We've always felt like a library is an important place to express a community's vision of the arts. So I wanted to make sure that people knew that as they look over this. But I think it is also appropriate, as Mary Jane just directed, that we we can talk about other things after we handle this policy and potentially take action on it. So it's a good time for discussion, so whatever questions people have, this is the time for it. You might want to take a minute to look at it again, so I see people reading through. And thank you, Mary Jane, you did do a very good job over the weekend to board members of giving updates, and when you had changes to what we had and seeking people's input and all
Well, I
that.
have to tell you, I was aghast when I looked at it, I'm like, oh my God, I missed that.
Yeah, if there was
Not perfect.
it would be Mary Jane that would catch even
Yes.
her
No, but
own.
it's like when you keep looking at something and then pretty soon you don't see it, like your name,
That's right.
And then it was 3 days and I looked at it online and I'm like, oh my goodness.
Usually it's after you get something printed,
Yeah, that
then
too.
that's when the mistakes really show up to you. And you've looked at the drafts 100 times.
So this looks, I like that there is, hanging art must be displayed using the BADL art display system, that we would have an art display system is a good thing.
And there's a couple that I've looked at, there's one that Dan suggested and then there was another one that I found.
And do they have ones that are flexible if you're hanging, a quilt exhibit, for example, versus.
Is this going to be voted on tonight?
Potentially, that's the.
Don't you think that we ought to have a little time to look at it? I just, and comments from the public?
We invite comments. We have the intention of acting on this tonight, but we do invite comments, we're not hurrying.
That's not the point. The point is, it's not in the paper yet, the community doesn't know about the policy, didn't have a chance to review the policy, make input. I don't think it's appropriate to vote on it tonight.
We're moving forward on the process that this library board has used on policies. which I
You're not
don't-
going to acquire any art for this new library in a week
Right.
or in a month.
Right.
So to allow that time for public discussion, the Art Council meets tomorrow night. I will be glad to take this to the Art Council and ask them if they have any input. And I think you ought to have input from the community.
Thank you, Barbara. I'd like our board to give consideration to the comment. that we've
I
gotten from the public.
understand what she's saying.
Mhm. And it's a lot. It's not just a two-line policy.
Yeah.
And there are some very stringent restrictions, and there are some very specific requirements, and I think they should be subject to review.
Thank you for that input. There are some more things I wanted to add. As detailed as this document is, it is not everything having to do with our art acquisition and our activities around art. It is important to know, I mean, this is a library, not an art gallery, and we have been consulting with our design team because which is going to be important for the.
When you say design team, are you talking about your architect?
We're talking about our architect, the design team is really the architect, the engineers, and the construction manager. But the architect is important in what I'm
He's not a
about to
member
say.
of this community.
Just a minute, Barbara. This is the meeting of the board, and I'm running this meeting, and you haven't let me finish my sentence. So I'd like to.
Don't insult me.
I'm
trying
not.
to discuss this.
And I appreciate that. I'm trying to too, and I'm not insulting you. I'm just saying.
Yes, you are.
I'm asking you to let me finish because I am giving you the courtesy. We want your input, so we're letting you speak. And there's some bodies that don't have the public engage with them at all, and so we're not trying to stop you from that. What I wanted to say is that it's important, and probably to your point, this is complicated, and there's a lot of things that have to be looked at with this. So this policy is not the end all to what we've got to do. We've got to know where in the building we can even look at art. And that is what I'm trying to suggest that we need to consult with our architect about. And we have been. We have been talking about places. So we cannot have any entity making a decision on what we're going to get or when we're going to get it. And as you aptly pointed out, we're not going to make acquisitions in the next week or two. We have to have good guidelines from the building and our architect is aware of this, of what kinds of art will be appropriate in our building, and we want to range, and where we may be able to use sculpture and where we may be able to use other pieces. We have a lot of glass in this building, so there's not and a lot of walls, and even in this library, which is very small, you know, and in the new one, even though it's a lot larger, we've got to have room for the books and the bookshelves. We can't use all the walls. You know, we have to know where in the library we can even put forth art. That was what I was trying to say. I'm not trying to say anybody's making the decisions for people in this town. I wasn't, and I don't think I was trying to say what you thought I was trying to say. And it is not in any way to denigrate your comments or your thoughts. And we're not, we're considering what you said. I want to hear from our board members, and John has already suggested that what you're saying makes sense, and it may be the approach that the board, but I just like you to give the chance for the board to deliberate on the input you just had. And let the board give input on this, and we'll move ahead properly. But this is a piece of what we're going to do, or this is suggested as a piece of what we're going to do as a body to handle the issue of art in our building.
If I could just interject, from a building design standpoint, probably the most critical thing from the architect engineer's perspective is if we know you want to put art in a particular place, that guides us to where we want to make sure we have lighting that is appropriate to the display of that art, whether it's on the wall or sculpture, or you might even have artwork that is illuminated of some sort that requires an electrical outlet. So that's the kind of integration that we are.
And we also know,
Talk
in
about.
terms of what's already been suggested about a system for
Hanging.
hanging art, we get input from our design, and we also know from you that there are only certain areas in this new building that will be appropriate for the display of art. So it has to be both ways. We don't have just total that we can buy any kind of, that we can, and we don't want to give any kind of art committee a sense that it's just that, we can do anything in this building. We have limitations.
Yeah.
We also have, we've talked about acquisition of pottery or pieces of art, but to properly display them, and as I understand it, as we've had to cut things, we have a question as to whether, part of the arts and amenities, we may need the amenity of the display
case.
the display case,
Sure.
which we want to have, but we might have to have the budget to reflect that. So there's a lot of pieces we have to talk about, and maybe that we need to move in some steps.
I feel, we can hold off on this. I'd like to table this, right, for a voting today, and have copies of this out in the hallway, on the desk there for our patrons to look at, with a sign saying future art process. Also, I'd like to input from the Arts Council, they're significant, and I'd like to have one of our members on the building committee at the Arts Council meeting, if there are any questions.
Well, that was one of my questions. I'm glad that the Arts Council's included in this. I just wanted to know if they knew, if they had been talked to.
Well, they need, they need to review this before the meeting.
Well, their meeting is tomorrow, and they haven't they know that we're working on a policy, but Barbara's right, they haven't looked at we're looking at this draft, and as Mary Jane
And
is.
I'd also like to know the sources for Mary Jane's putting this together. What sources were consulted?
I don't, Barbara, I don't have that paper with me.
She has a chart that
There
does
was
show.
the Durham County Library in North Carolina, Galesburg Library, Illinois, Batavia County Library in Illinois, the Bud Warner Memorial Library, and I forget exactly where that one is, and I don't remember the other two.
Could you email that to me and I'll take it to the Art Council?
What we can do,
I can.
go ahead.
In this process, I'd like an artist attorney to look at this. I'd like Doug Peters to take a look at it.
Mhm. One of the things I'd like to say, I appreciate everybody's input because I think it's really important. But I think one of the things that has to be remembered is that there are 7 of us who were elected to be on this board. And as elected members of this board, we're the ones that are the policymakers. And while I appreciate people's input, and I think it's important, I think the board also has to remember that we need to be making the decisions. With input, with input. But my understanding was that this policy needed to be done fairly quickly, which I did. I worked on it for quite some time, made sure that I did research, talked with other people, had a couple of meetings with Mary Jo, Sharon, and Alma. And
That's the policy committee, and those are public meetings. They were posted in public meetings. The process used for this policy development is the duly set process for the Belleville Area District Library to do policies. The question, though, of when it has to be adopted is...
well, the thing is, though, you can't, if we table it, then that means we don't have, it doesn't get voted on until November, okay? Which means from October to November, we don't have an art selection committee because there's no policy for it. That's all I wanted to say. So the longer it's postponed, the longer we don't have an art selection committee.
We, and that's a good point. You always have to balance due process and input with moving forward. Without having at least a start, we were kind of shooting in the dark. And when we went to the BACA and have had discussions with BACA and the Friends, and I've participated and carried those. I didn't invite the whole committees to go, but just trying to move this along. We made it clear that the board was working to set some guidelines. This as Mary Jane said, this is a certain thing. This is over selection of permanent acquisition items. There are other issues, as I said, fund development, there are rotating, temporary exhibits. There are other issues that we don't think we'll have all finished, but we at least needed to get a start. We needed to get a sense, the size, the indications in the research were that the size of committees, if you get them too large, they don't move as well. And so the idea of voting members and the idea that would be in the committee, discussed about the committee, was informed by best practice indications we had gotten. But there's no reason that it can't be looked at. We have moved far enough that we are, and we made it very clear, convening a preliminary group tomorrow. And both Mary Jane and Alma talked about that in their meeting, to bring people together. Whether we had adopted this permanently tonight or whether we don't, that was very clearly a preliminary meeting, because we do not have time to constitute the art committee, but we wanted to begin to bring together the people that the arts committee, the arts council, the Friends had identified as having an interest in this, the artists that we have been able to identify. So it's a preliminary, what we're bringing together tomorrow. And Barbara has spoken about that she'd like to see BACA be able to look at this, our draft policy, and this preliminary group to look at it prior to our adopting it. And John has expressed that can make some sense, and in fact, he actually talked about holding it off. So I don't know that it's going to stop, or we can still have the same preliminary talk with people in the community that are interested tomorrow that we were envisioning, whether this is formally adopted or not. And certainly, we don't want to, we're asking for input from other parts of the community, and we don't want to alienate those parts of the community. So,
Madam Chair, I'd also like to comment that you will be fundraising in this community for this art. It's my understanding that it's not part of the budget.
right.
And so to have the goodwill of the community, although you are the decision makers, you need to communicate with the community and get input from the community before you ask them for money.
That has been the way we've been moving forward on this library, is doing a lot of input with community. So
I have one thing to say too.
okay, and I've asked this board, I want your consent.
And I apologize, MJ, because I did not look at it before the email drafts. So this is my first time looking at it. But it looks, as a non-lawyer and as somebody who hasn't looked at this kind of policy before, I don't find anything exceptional that I would have anything against, but I think there's one thing that needs clarification, and it's in the first section. There's no at least I don't see it, or maybe it's somewhere else and I missed it. There's no method of choosing the members on the committee. It says it spells out where they're coming from, and how the officers were, but not how they're chosen. And it could be very well like the Friends, that there's not a million people jumping to be on the board, but but at least initially, I think there will be people who will want to be on this, and because that's when a lot of important decisions will be made as we're going forward.
That part of it was, Sharon had gone to a BACA meeting and they identified 4 people that would be interested.
That were interested, yeah.
Sharon and Mary Jo were going to talk to the Friends this past Saturday. We talked about that in a meeting, and the way we left it, and maybe it should have been spelled out in there, was that the chair and the director would pick the 2 trustees. BACA would pick their member,
Their voting member,
and the Friends would pick their voting member. And we just sort of left it up to Mary Jo and Sharon as far as the artist went. I can see why it should have been in there.
I think that the thought was that the board, or some kind of way this board identify, with input, formalizes the selection. And maybe that is an issue that needs to be clarified in here. But I also feel there are elements as we move forward with fund development, and this I'm talking especially with Barbara Miller, who's really talked a lot about this over the years, and we're eager for, she and I have talked quite a bit about this, eager for her involvement with this. We aren't, this policy isn't directed at that aspect of what we're looking for the community to do. And I don't know that we're gonna have adopted policies for every aspect of what we do, but we need some kind of structure. So, that's, and as you've noted, Joy, there might be in what was the intent and what's actually written here, and when everybody else reads it, they don't run into discussions with the intent, so there are some things.
Those sound reasonable,
it's just not there.
It's not there, it's
So,
not there.
I think it's just reinforcing the point that's been brought up by the public, that, there may be a period of consideration. The main thing is, and it's probably consistent with our earlier discussion about Sumter and our earlier discussion, that we have to start moving. We've spent a lot, the building committee in particular, spent a whole lot of time getting our plan and construction and all together, but there are other things that have to be done. The Sumter piece has to be done, we have to start moving on it. The art piece, as Barbara has pointed out in our last meeting last month, that I think you said that fund development needs to start yesterday, and we just can't go longer. We needed some structure, but this structure really doesn't really talk about that, and that's what I was bringing up earlier. So we need to get ourselves going, and I think this sense of engaging the community, and particularly engaging the entities to which we've already reached out, it can't hurt us. It can be helpful, and I think the guidelines John gave. Is there comfort with this board in terms of those guidelines John suggested, that we hold off on finalizing?
It'd be nice to also have a little article in the paper or in this section saying that we have this at the library artist, so people can freely pick it up at the desk, take a look at it, and any suggestions would be appreciated.
And the BACA chair, is Mendy, is she chair or president?
She's president.
President. It's been very helpful. They can be helpful in identifying, especially not just the BACA voting member, but potential artists, and she already has been engaging in that. So I think the whole point that we've been talking about is that this area of the work is one of the special places to engage the community, and that's why there's so much overlap between what marketing is looking at doing and this particular policy that is being worked on in the policy committee. So I kind of think as we're discussing this through, we're coming to a more engaging way to work on it. And while I do know that Trustee Dawson has put in a tremendous amount of work and really giving us framework to move forward, because we just didn't feel we could just start meeting and start doing things without some grounding, that looking at it, and it is longer than many of the policies we have and has a lot of pieces in it.
For the sake of closure, do I need to make the motion to table it, or can?
I'm supposed to know the Robert's Rules of Order.
I make a motion that we
Can't
table,
just not do it.
table this discussion, and then next meeting, I will take it off the table, we'll vote on it with suggestions.
And, yeah, the motion is there, and in the discussion, clearly with the intent of engaging the public at large, and particularly the entities that are identified in here. And BACA, and some of this is gonna move pretty quickly, because BACA meets tomorrow, and we can begin to talk to them about it, and this preliminary meeting of some of the people that have already been identified that we might wanna work with, will be meeting tomorrow as well. Tomorrow evening at 8. Oh, we have the motion, we haven't voted on the motion.
And that's
so.
been seconded.
Seconded, is there a second for the motion?
Sure is quiet.
It
I'll
is-
second the motion.
Okay. It has been moved by Juriga and seconded by Trustee Caver that the motion, that the policy proposal be tabled until our next meeting. For the purpose of gaining input from the community.
So, in my opinion, if we're going to put this out there for the community, I think it would be good to add the part that you,
Yeah.
that you guys were.
That we had in our heads.
Yes,
on the paper.
yeah, in this first section. on
So
how
this,
they would be chosen.
it'll be more input from the board as well as more input than the community. So we'll stamp it draft and it's,
But include that section.
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
in what so that means we'll have to work on some things. I would like to accommodate BACA's meeting, and have them look at least what we have and stamp that
I
draft.
can get that in
and
there
some
for the
things.
meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll work on some things early tomorrow and have things available. Your meeting starts at 7,
Yes,
and we have notified the 4 people that I talked to, the 4 people that BACA identified about the follow-up meeting, and I talked also to the president of BACA, and she is going to try to move her meeting such that those 4 can come over here at least close to 8 o'clock, and we begin a preliminary discussion with people in the community interested in this, and then we come to some ideas of what kinds of subgroups we need. I'm suggesting and really feel strongly we need the subgroup on fund development, but we also have to have guidelines on art acquisition. So I think we're making progress, we just can't overstep. Other comments before we vote?
So does that motion need to be modified slightly?
In what direction?
For the,
Table it for vote till next month, but,
That could be a 2
Modify.
separate motion.
the draft, okay,
Yeah, it could be.
okay,
so the vote right now is on table.
okay.
It's been moved by Juriga and supported by Caver. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, signify by saying no.
I will take the initiative to make sure that Doug Peters gets a copy of this.
Okay, before Doug Peters gets a copy of it, or Baca gets a copy of it, I believe
I would
Troy
like to
has
make
a
a
motion.
motion that before any
Anybody.
further copies go out, that there is a section as indicated by MJ of how the members of this committee are chosen. And no, that's the copy that will be.
That the copy that will be circulated by tomorrow, midday tomorrow or so, will have the clarification of the selection, formal selection member of the committee.
It will go out tonight because I have to be at Carmanos tomorrow at 7 a.m.
Oh my goodness. We better get rid of this, get done with this meeting, so.
That's a good idea.
It's not
It's 9:20? Oh, goodness. So, good, well, we need to if we're having some more, okay. So, there's another motion by Chinevas, seconded by Jariga, that the discussion,
That it include a section on how members of this committee are chosen.
any further discussion? All those in favor signify, of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed by no. The motion is carried, and I believe we're moving, yes.
Okay, but before we get to that point, just so that I don't have a ton of emails going back and forth between everybody, what we had discussed in our meeting, the four of us. Okay, the BADL chair and director, I'll clean up the language, but this is basically it. The BADL chair and director will choose the 2 trustees. Right?
Or voting members.
Right. The Friends group will select 1 member. Baca group will select 1 member. And artists will be selected by the chair and the director. That will be.
Right, which is what we talked about, but I do wanna, and maybe this needs to be in there too, that we made it very clear to Baca and to the Friends that the number of people that were interested are needed for our efforts.
Right.
So they may not be voting members of the selection committee, but we need those members for a lot of the community engagement, the kinds of points that Barbara Miller has brought up tonight about working on fund development, which are not gonna just be 5 people. It's gonna be a wider group, and so
These are the voting members we're talking
Yeah,
we're
these are
talking
just the
about
voting
voting members. And so the second meeting tomorrow, the meeting that we have, the preliminary meeting, is really gonna work to help fill out this other, and we might have to look at other motions. But for this particular committee, I believe what you just said is our understanding. So that's, everybody has heard this, right?
Yeah. Oh, well.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Okay, and you can send it to Mary Jo, to get it to Mary
I'll
Jo.
send
You don't
it
have
to
to
you,
search.
I'll send it to you, I'll send it to you. You guys tell me if that's okay, and then we'll make a copy.
So we all have to be looking, goodbye, Matt, thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Bye.
Understand, I do too.
I just want to point out, I think your policy discussion lasted longer than the building discussion.
Oh, yeah.
Well, good. Finally we got to
Taking
something that you didn't take the whole discussion. It's not just, and you have a place in this, Dan. This art business, you have a place in it. You're not setting it up. I don't want Barbara to think that we're saying that the architect is gonna do this.
You don't need to compete with that.
Right. It's not that you're not involved. So, good. I think this was a helpful discussion, I really do. And I'm not looking at it as contentious at all. And I'm sorry if there's any sense that anybody had about that. It's just important for us to have community engagement, and clearly, some of the points brought up were very helpful to us. And we have voted, and we're done. Are we done with
Yes.
F1?
We're done.
No.
So now we can approve accounts payable.
Make a motion, we accept it. We approve accounts payable as presented.
Second.
Been moved by Dawson, supported by Shehevitz, that the accounts payable as presented will be adopted. There are often some specific questions. We already talked about the DTE has not been spent, not been cashed. Are there any other items that might show up in this that people want to talk about before we vote? Sometimes there are. There don't seem to be tonight. I don't see any. So not hearing any. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? This motion carries with no dissenting votes. We move on to item 9, the director's report.
I will be brief. In addition to what is in your written report, I just wanted to give a shout out to our homegrown knowledge this Thursday. It's going to be Diane Eisinger. She's going to talk about stained glass, and we're very happy to have her do that for us.
Amazing artist.
Yes. Any questions?
I wish I could be there.
That's good, very good. And I appreciate you bringing that out and the items that you included in the packet, and I think the public has access. The things that Mary Jo kind of chooses, again, the Harvest Fest item is part of the
Yes, please come to the Harvest Fest on Saturday.
and Barbara already brought up the
Very good, well.
opera theater and peas.
And I think the pancake breakfast for the firemen is this Saturday.
Everything's this Saturday.
All kinds of things are this Saturday. You can actually bring that in trustee comments, the different issues that are going on that you want to bring up. But the ones that the director is bringing to our attention are ones that are specifically here in the library. Are there any questions to Mary Jo? Thank you. Thank you for, and there's more material to look at, but thank you for the points you brought to our attention, and thank you for providing this written director's report. So we are to item 10, which is trustee comments, and therefore I'll start with that one.
Okay, I wanted to say that I appreciate all the hard work that MJ did putting this policy together and the research that she did.
While she's still on the building committee,
Yeah.
counting up all those hours.
No, I got you on to
We
it.
don't count these, we don't count these hours.
That's it?
That's it?
Oh, you didn't want to talk about the,
Fair enough.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was just saying because you were making an announcement for events that were coming up, but I think it's on
those are
Saturday.
events coming up at the library is what the director is.
Yeah, anyway, I think it's this coming Saturday at the fire station.
Which one?
Which one?
I think it's
Belleville.
Oh, the Belleville Fire Station. So it's Belleville pancake.
Belleville Road Fire Station, Van Buren.
Oh, it's Van Buren, okay.
Is it Van Buren?
The one up
From
toward,
Tyler?
up north of Tyler, that one?
Close to
It's in the
Ecorse,
paper.
close to Ecorse Road.
Right, that's, yeah, way north area. So that's good to know, so you don't go to the wrong fire station.
I say, where's my pancakes?
Thank you.
Me.
You.
Okay, so I have a gift of sorts for Mary Jo.
She looks suspicious already.
Okay, so when my mom died, I had a cousin who donated $25 to the library in memory of my mom, and it was to be earmarked for a puppet theater. Well, I turned 70 on Saturday, and my same cousin wrote a check for $70 not in memory of me, in honor of me. Just to make that clear. That's why I wanted to know how much she gave you.
Okay.
So here's the other $5, so we now have $100 for a puppet theater.
Thank you.
Well, good, that's a lovely trustee comment. Top that, Joy. Do you have more?
I wanna know
No, that
how,
was it.
I wanna know how we're gonna bob for donuts at the museum.
Oh, it's easy.
Don't take time
hang
on
them
the
from a
system.
tree.
Yeah.
They hang them from a tree, and you got it.
Oh.
And you chase
They
it.
blossoms?
Yeah, you don't get your face wet.
Alright, no, I don't have anything except for come to Harvest Fest. It'll be fun.
It's one of the great programs that we have here. Trustee Caver. With the nimble fingers.
I just want to congratulate the building committee and the board on a job well done, getting the site plan approved. Thanks to everyone for all the hard work that they're doing and putting in.
You're welcome.
Trustee Jarita.
About Harvest Fest, did I hear, Dan, did you mention that you were gonna do the outline of the building in Alex by Harvest Fest?
Yes.
What I'd like to do is get access then to a drone with a camera and go hundreds of feet up and take a photo of that shooting down.
And you have such access. I
Yeah,
would
and you just put your
imagine.
phone in it and,
That'd be great.
yeah, cool.
I told Mary Jo if anybody's parked there, we'll just spray paint up.
Just
them
put
on
the
their
light
hood.
in the car.
I've seen yellow stripes down roads over
Yeah.
to the animals.
We're gonna just watch the weather report. We'll either come Thursday or Friday afternoon.
What
You're
process are you
painting
gonna use, a powder or a paint?
I had Alex looking at, we'll probably just use like traffic marking paint.
Okay, good.
It'll last a while.
Yeah.
It's not gonna be.
Do you have a form that you're gonna use 2x4s and then spray, or just?
We're gonna figure it out.
Okay.
We're gonna use a bunch of tape, but it's not gonna be exact. We're just
Yeah.
gonna kind of
Yeah,
give it our best
so it's
shot.
gonna be a wider line though, right?
Or is it gonna be colored? Is it gonna be
Just
some kind of
white.
color?
We'll probably use orange traffic marking paint.
Okay.
You know, or something that tries to stand out a little bit. and
4 inches
try-
wide, or?
No, it'd probably be, the width of a spray can.
It's a
Like
spray
we should-
can, not a
If
brush.
I'm going up 100 feet, I'm not gonna see anything, if it's not wide enough, you know.
Well, we might be able to use white. I don't know if it's, I don't know if white.
I'm-
Why?
Why?
Say
Why?
why?
Line,
Oh,
the width
Why?
of the line.
Can you spray paint behind John?
Well, John,
Can you
the
see me now?
purpose of this, and again, the purpose is to give the people on the ground a chance
Yeah.
to see this. So if it works for your drone effort,
okay.
good,
Yeah.
but what we're really trying to do is make sure that people have something a little more
tangible feeling of where the village
to
is.
have a sense by the time of Harvest Fest, and we won't have our temporary sign, the final sign up, because there is the permit process and all this we're going through, so we'll just have to have some kind of indication of follow the whatever orange line to see where the new library is or something. We'll have something out there. Orange would be good, it is Harvest Fest, it is.
Oh, there you go. Orange and black.
There you go.
Halloween. We'll see how it goes. We may try to do a little bit of layout on the interior, like to create the edge of the, like the hallway that leads between the circ desk and the meeting room down to children's. We're not going to get into, we won't be able to do it too detailed.
You're not gonna translate this
Yeah, probably not exactly.
onto the cement.
And that's only the first floor.
Right. Yeah. No,
Yeah, and now you're gonna put a relief of the second floor.
Yeah.
Oh, well, let's not get too bogged down.
Although, Jonathan, do bring the drone, because it would
Yes.
be fun to see
Let's get this.
if we're standing on the terrace, you can figure out the elevation. and
Okay,
guess what the sunset view would be.
okay, my architect friend
Sorry.
and my building interest friend. Yeah, is that your comment?
Yes.
Now, I get equal time to your comment, so I don't want you stopping me in the middle of what I have to say. The site plan approval is very important. Letter that I wrote, the independent was able to accommodate that full letter. I really appreciate it because it was a letter of appreciation to the city of Belleville, but also to the entire of our district, which is also Van Buren, the main part of the population, and Sumter. And we've been working with all of them, and there was an indication at the end of that letter that we're working with all of them. And it is in this intergovernmental function that we've worked with Sumter since meetings, and we worked with Belleville to move our efforts along. And this is a piece, so in addition to the building committee, there's other things that happens with this board, and we do it, and I have, we're counting up a lot of hours, all of us are, and I really appreciate the work that everybody's done, and I appreciate, and I can say because of those meetings, that the cooperation from our intergovernmental partners has been really important. We're also going to try and do something with Van Buren that will be able to get on their, I'm looking at Barbara because she's brought this up many times, get on their cable to give people information. Our engineers our engineer Brian was particularly helpful at the site plan approval. There was a lot of interest in that. So if we can develop some kind of a presentation with a PowerPoint that includes a lot of the kinds of things and have involvement not just of Dan, but also with Brian and perhaps Matt, the appropriate kinds of message, and we have to work it out on how long and get the slides that would go into the piece so that we can do more to inform the public. And that's, I've been talking to the Van Buren Township Supervisor about that, very preliminarily. And then last off, I've taken up what you board members have always done, and that's visiting libraries. You'll be probably very interested in this. This morning, over the last 2 days, I was up north in Sheboygan County to close up on the summer home, and our former director, Deb Green, was able to go with me, and we were able to stop in the Sheboygan District Library.
Yes.
Now, it's not the same library I remember when I was a kid and I used to go to in Sheboygan. And then they had, in between the 60s and early 2000s, they had a smaller library, but they've extended it. They indicated it's 27,000 square feet, so a little bit less than what we have, but it was very interesting. And there are elements of that visit that I'd like to share with the building. I'm not going to take time tonight, but I'd like to share with the building committee and also with the arts interest groups, because how they raised money, how they display things and things like that. I think it's helpful every library that we go to, but I was interested to see what Sheboygan had, and I hadn't in all these years. They've had that there since 2006, I think. And in all my visits to Sheboygan, I hadn't gone, so I'm getting up on what you all do, visit to libraries in every place you go.
That's where my parents grew up, and
In the library?
well, no, not in the library,
But in Sheboygan.
And I can remember, gosh, this was probably 10 years ago. I went there while we were up at Carp Lake, for a weekend.
Yeah.
And I went in to see if I could do some genealogy research, and they just had this wonderful room with all of these binders and newspaper clippings and everything. And I pulled out my great-grandmother's, it was like a little thing, she had a party at her house, and all of the different people that were there and who got what gift, and then there was another article that was the announcement and a picture of my grandparents on my mom's side the day of their wedding.
Mm-hmm.
So
It's fun. That is really exciting, and one of the reasons I brought it up tonight is that I know you're from Sheboygan, and so I thought you'd have special interest in it. It was fun. It was a good thing, and I think it might be, I'll discuss it at other times. Now that's the end of what I have to say.
Madam Chair, I make a motion the meeting adjourned.
Second.
It's
I jumped
moved
on it,
and
sorry.
supported. All those in favor signify by saying aye,
wait, what about the other part?
or say no.
No.
I want to stay here all night. If I go to 7:30 in the morning, maybe if it goes straight from here.